Hello everyone, welcome to English and More. I am your English teacher Shweta Roy, and today I am here with another beautiful poem, Childhood by Marcus Nathan. So this particular poem is very precious because it is talking about a precious phase of your life, that is childhood. So all of you would agree with me on this statement that childhood is the most memorable part of our lives. It is the most wonderful part of our lives, right? So if you remember your childhood, you all are still children, right? But if you remember your childhood, any memory which is which is much more worth cherishing, please do share with me in the comment section. So before I begin with this poem, I would like to ask you a question. Why do you think childhood is so very important and so very precious? And did you enjoy growing up? Because you are now, right now, in a phase of transition, right? You are in the period of adolescence, right? Which comes right after childhood, right after middle childhood, right? So this phase of adolescence is very confusing. When you were in grade 10th, you had done a poem called Amanda, if you remember. So that poem talked about the phase of growing up, right? So this and you have read many other poems and works on childhood, and you all know that this period is very tough, and it is not just tough for the individual who is an adolescent. It is also very difficult for people who have to deal with adolescent children, adolescents, right? So because there are a lot of changes now. How many of you agree with this quote? This is a quote by Roald Dahl. You all are familiar with Roald Dahl, who is specially known for his writing for children, right? He's a children's writer specifically, more popular, right? So he says, grown-ups are complicated creatures, full of quirks and secrets. Do you agree with this? So I want your inputs on this quote. Why I am beginning with this quote, you will see, because this is related to the theme of the poet. Because the poet talks about he cherishes his childhood, and he doesn't like growing up. So let us see what the poet has to say and how far is it relatable to each one of our lives. When I was going through this poem, I really found it very relatable. So childhood, the term childhood, when I give you the term childhood, what all words come up in your mind? Well, childhood is related to innocence, isn't it? It is related to all the fond memories. It is related to fairy tales. It is related to children are said they are closer to God, isn't it? They are so innocent, they are so precious, they are so pure at heart and soul. So all these words come in our mind when we think of a child, or when we go back to our childhood days, right? So let us see what the poet has to say. When did my childhood go? Was it the day when I ceased to be 11? All of you must be, of course, more than 11, right? So the poet is wondering, where did he lose his childhood? That means the poet has most probably, he senses that he has lost his childhood. So was it the day when I ceased to be 11? Was it the time I realized that hell and heaven could not be found in geography and therefore could not be? Was that the day? So here you see there are a lot of questions in the poet's mind. Now childhood is related to curiosity, when children have a lot of questions, right? So here the poet is asking, he is realizing that he has lost his childhood, and he is asking, where did he lose it? When did he lose it? Did he lose it the day when he was no more 11? So after 11 you gradually become mature, right? So was it that time when he gradually matured in age? Was it the time I realized that hell and heaven could not be found in geography? So when we are children, our mind is very, we are very innocent creatures, right? So we tend to believe whatever we read in maybe fairy tales, or maybe the stories that our parents or grandparents tell us, right? So we believe in fairies, we believe in hell and heaven, right? We believe in God's wrath. So your parents would have told you, if you don't do things correctly, then God will punish you, and if you're not virtuous, then you would go to hell, right? And if you do things, positive things, if you be kind, if you be courteous, right, if you behave yourselves properly, then God would bless you, and you would be sent to heaven. So heaven is a beautiful place. Heaven has fairies, right? So all these stories, when we are children, we tend to believe, isn't it? But as and when we grow up, we start questioning to the existence of hell and heaven, and then we so you also must have gone through this phase of life when you kind of initially believe that yes, hell and heaven do exist, and I should do things properly so that I am sent to heaven and not sent down to hell, right? But when you grew up, you started questioning the idea of hell and heaven and fairies and all of that, right? And you started to lose interest in all of that, because you started to learn geography, you started to learn subjects like factual subjects like geography, history, which are full of facts. So there is no mention of hell and heaven, so of course there is no place such as hell and heaven. So the poet is asking whether it was all these days when he ceased to be an 11-year-old child, when he realized that hell and heaven had no existence in real life. So these all were the components of a child's, these are all the components of child's bedtime story. So please note that he is stressing on the word geography because he capitalizes it. So it is a reference to the fact that at that time the poet started to familiarize himself with the rational world. As we grow up, we start to familiarize ourselves with the rational and the real world, right? The poet uses the line, and then we sometimes become shattered, we become despaired, because all these things are so beautiful to imagine. Even if you imagine it today, if you imagine that, if you wish that these fairies, fairies, heaven, all these sound so magical and so beautiful, right? You wish that these actually existed. But when you know factually, if you think, or rationally if you think, then you start questioning, and then you become despaired, because you think that these actually do not exist. So, and therefore could not be, this line definitely shatters the imagination, the world of imagination of the poet, right? And the last line is a refrain. See this one, was that the day? Okay, was it the day? Was that the day? This is a refrain. Refrain is basically repetition. It's a poetic device. It's a repetition. Just like in music, you have few lines which is repeated. So in poems also you have a line or two which is repeated to emphasize on the idea. So the idea over here is that the poet is now transitioning into adulthood, and that is the reason why this poem has been incorporated in your syllabus, because it is all relatable to you all, because you are all in the period of transition, right? When did my childhood go? See, repetition. Refrain. Was it the time I realized that adults were not all they seemed to be? They talked of love and preached of love, but did not act so lovingly. Was that the day? Again, repetition. So the poet is asking, so here the poet foregrounds the attitude of mature ones towards a child who has just become an adult. Now he suddenly realizes that the adults around him were not behaving the way they behaved. So when you are a child, you are always pampered, you are showered with love. But as and when you grow up, the attitude of adults towards you also changes. A child is not treated in the similar way as an adult is treated, right? An adolescent is not treated in the same way. You must have heard this, your parents saying, now you're no more a kid, so do not do all of that, right? So the same thing was happening, and the poet was in a state of confusion. What is happening with him, right? He had suddenly a realization that the adults around him were not behaving as they did before. When he was a child, they showered him with love and affection. They gave him importance and gave him everything. Children seek attention, right? And when there are children around you, you tend to give attention, right? So he also got that. So the most important point that he wants to emphasize is love. The poet says that with time, their love has also changed, right? Now here, love has not exactly changed, but the way of showing affection and love has changed, but the poet is not able to realize that, right? According to him, since he is now going into a transitional phase, so he thinks that he is missing those lovable, affectionate bond with the adults around him. He's missing those days, so he doesn't want to grow up, right? He couldn't understand that the poet has now stepped into the phase of maturity. He needed their assistance. So this is the period of transition when you do not want to leave your childhood. So it's a very confusing state, right? So that confusion is highlighted by the poet. Where did my childhood go? Was it when I found my mind was really mine, to use whichever way I choose, producing thoughts that were not those of other people but my own and mine own alone? Was that the day? So again, you have seen that the refrain is being used at the beginning of each stanza, and that refers to an important idea. The state of childhood is very, very precious and important for all of us. So here he is emphasizing and lamenting the loss of innocence. With the loss of innocence comes the loss of imagination, the spontaneity of thought, because now he is entering into manhood, adulthood gradually, right? So he is now becoming self-aware, right? It grows up in the mind of a child when he or she steps into adolescence, right? Now it has made aware of his own thoughts and own body, because he says that my brain is mine own. Now I'm not carrying the thoughts of others, because adolescence is the phase when you start thinking independently. That is an important characteristic feature of an adolescent, independent thinking. So that is what the poet is also having, that the same thought the poet is having, right? The poet now couldn't think like a child, okay? And the touch of purity and innocence that he had as a child, the infant soul in him, he thinks is no more there, and it has ceased. Where did my childhood go? It went to some forgotten place that is hidden in an infant's face. That's all I know. Very, very important. The last few lines are very, very important in this poem. So the truth, the kind of epiphany or the sudden realization appears in the poet's mind, and he says in reality he is an adult by age. Definitely he has matured, physically he has grown up, but the essence of childhood, the spirit in him is still residing, and that is what is important. How did he gain his childhood again? Where is it hidden? In the heart of a child and the face of an infant. So it is in the face of an infant and the heart of a child that purity is glittering in its full lustre. Those innocent faces are brimming with the hope of a new day. And that is what finally is able to cheer him up. So what that the poet has grown into an adult. He is stepping into the phase of adolescence, which is filled with a lot of confusion, a lot of changes in the mind and the body. So emotions and physical, your physique undergoes a lot of change. But what is giving him hope? When he sees an infant's face and he connects his own, because it is said that when you see a child, you also become a child, right? So that spirit in him, the childhood in him, is evoked once again when he sees an infant's face, and that brightens up his day. He becomes more hopeful. So what a wonderful poem, isn't it, children? So this is personally one of my favorites. I hope you enjoyed and you also related to some extent to this beautiful poem. Now coming to the poetic devices, first of all is personification, because childhood is personified. Where did it go? Of course, when did it go? So childhood cannot go anywhere. So human attributes to childhood. And refrain I have already explained. Now there are a few rhetorical questions also. If you see those questions, rhetorical questions are those questions which are not meant to be answered, but it is used to explain certain points, okay, or arguments. And then of course he talks about the mind producing thoughts metaphorically, so there is a metaphor there, so that is another poetic device, right? So these are the common poetic devices that have been used in this poem, and it's a short poem, a very simple poem, but it has a deep thought and so relatable to your lives, each one of our lives. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed reading this poem with me, and I'm looking forward to your answers. What was your favorite childhood memory which you still cherish? Please answer them in the comment section, and we will come up soon with our next lesson. Meanwhile, please stay tuned, share this video amongst your friends, subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you so much. Take care until we meet again. Bye bye.